Welcome back. I'm talking to Neil Sanders, and we were just discussing the Sun newspaper. Now, we're filming today on the Saturday, the 8th of December, and the headline is "Kate Shock as Hoaxed Nurse Kills Herself." So this is the story where some hoaxers in an Australian radio program ring the hospital where Kate was in. She was allegedly had morning sickness for 3 days. They rang up, pretended to be the Queen, and managed to get through. They spoke to a nurse, and they managed to get through and get some information. So it was all a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
And then supposedly, well, according to the Sun, this woman has now killed herself.
Apparently.
Now, there's a huge hole in this story, right? Straight away, it says Kate Shock. Let me just state first: this woman may have killed herself, right? But it says Kate Shock as hoaxed nurse kills herself. You turn to the story. Let me just read part of it out, Neil. Sources said she was found unconscious by a worker from the hospital shortly after 9:30 a.m. But here's the key part: a post-mortem examination will be arranged. The death is being treated as unexplained. So the death's unexplained, and they've done no post-mortem and no inquest, right? So they don't know how she died, right? So how can they state on the front cover that she kills herself? So they don't. So that's jumping the gun, in my opinion. What it should say is Kate Shock as hoaxed nurse dies.
Yeah.
Right. So why are they wanting to put out the fact that she's killed herself before there's been a post-mortem or before they found out how she has died?
It's quite ironic, isn't it? Because that gentleman in question was suing people for, making statements that are not true or allegedly not true. Is that true?
Well, we don't know, but you see that. Let's just assume, or let's just hypothesize, and I'm not saying this is true, that she didn't kill herself and she was murdered. Okay, there's two motives I can think of. One, Kate goes into hospital for 3 days, supposedly with sickness because she's pregnant. Maybe something went on there when she was in hospital, and this nurse knew about it.
Possibly, yeah.
Or perhaps they wanted to demonise the Australian channel and the people who carried out this hoax against the Crown.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe that's possibly that would be a motive to demonise the people who've done this prank.
It's also an extension of the distraction, isn't it? Because again, nobody's talking about Jimmy Saville. Nobody's talking about. It's quite clever, really, because basically everyone went, "Oh, well, yeah, she's pregnant, that's wonderful. But let's not get distracted about this." What? Someone's dead? Oh, God, that's terrible. And it is, it's horrible that this woman has died. But if you were cynical minded, if you took a step back, you could look at it and go, well, what a perfect distraction.
Now then, Neil, Phillip Schofield was on his morning show questioning David Cameron. He pulls out this list of supposed people who've are paedophiles or been named on a particular website, and someone said, "Oh, you could see one of those names on the screen," sort of thing, and there was a big scandal about it. You just think that thing was a whole setup?
Yeah, I think the entire thing was a complete setup. There's several questions that need to be asked, right? Okay, when does the Prime Minister of Great Britain and her territories get interviewed on This Morning? Never. And if he was going to be interviewed on This Morning, they'd have been advertising it for weeks and weeks in advance, saying, we've got David Cameron, he's going to talk to me about utter rubbish on the television. The second point is, when did Phillip Schofield grow a pair? Phillip Schofield...
When did he what?
Grow a pair.
What does that mean?
He's really going to get some balls. He's not a scoop journalist, right, okay? He's not. He's Johnny middle of the road. Okay,
when did he grow a pair?
Yeah. When exactly? Do you know what I mean? What was it? With the influence of who was it? Gordon the Gopher? Was that it? In his ear going, you know what, Philip, you need to be a bit harder with these people, these women that come on This Morning, be a bit harsher with them. And luckily, it happened to be David Cameron. I don't believe it. I believe that just like the gentleman that we talked about earlier in the new Machiavelli, it was set up to make David Cameron look silly so that it garners sympathy. What's interesting about David Cameron's response as well, which is thoroughly offensive if you think about it, basically, Phillip Schofield said these names have been named on the internet as possible paedophiles. And David Cameron said, I think there's a danger here that gay people could be demonised. Nobody had said that. But it's quite clever in a way, because basically informed people go, oh, he's right, actually. There is a danger that people who happen to be homosexual could get drawn into this scandal, so we need to be a bit careful. And people who aren't very informed go, yeah, he's right, they're all a bit like that, aren't they? And so it's clever in as much as it basically, again, it's like you said about a phony bone of contention.
Yeah.
It's taken the argument from here and it's put it to here.
Yeah.
If you're looking at that from David Cameron's perspective, either considering that it might be dangerous for people that, or you shouldn't do that, you're assuming that these people on this list are innocent.
So let's come on to why do you think that was orchestrated, if it was orchestrated then?
Purely just to get it in, to take control of it. Again, that was the precursor that basically allowed ITV to be sued. It allowed Newsnight to be sued. Not that they actually mentioned the person that sued them, but they still basically, they actually weren't sued. They gave a voluntary donation, and it's just a way of, again, in the public eye, taking control of the situation and chastising people, saying, well, I best not do that because I don't want what happened to Phillip Schofield to happen to me.
All right, Neil. Well, you comparing the Saville thing with some of these other scandals, supposed scandals. So just tell us about.
Well, I mean, the one that was similar and recent was Penn State. Penn State is a university in America, and it transpired that Jerry Sandusky, one of the most sort of, he was a coach. He was involved with the American football team, and this is a hugely successful team and a hugely successful university, and it transpires that he's been having sex with the young boys against their will. And not only has he been doing that, but that's been covered up by the institution, by certain very well-respected people within the institution. And again, sporting instances of sex abuse within sporting institutions aren't uncommon. There was the Celtic scandal. There was a scandal with Gary Speed. Gary Speed, who also killed himself. His former mentor was apparently involved in a very similar scenario, abusing boys.
Gary Speed's former mentor?
Yeah, apparently so, yeah.
A football coach?
Yeah, apparently. Apparently Gary Speed was writing a book at the time that he hung himself.
Right. Do you know anything about the book?
Nobody does.
You got any thoughts on
Gary
Speed?
Well, I just wonder if he was going to talk about certain things like that. This has been exposed on various websites.
So just go back a second. So Gary Speed's his mentor. Which mentor? When he was at a football club, or when he was younger?
When he was a youth and he was training, essentially, one of the people that was one of his main coaches was later exposed to have been abusing boys.
Right.
And again, this isn't uncommon. There was a scandal through Celtic football club.
Do you know what club that was at? Leeds.
I don't know. It was when he was a youth. It was when he was a very good. The article is actually on David Icke's website. What's interesting is it links it to various other people, including the MP Stephen Milligan, that died in suspicious circumstances.
So he was writing a book. You see, the thing is with Gary Speed, if you think about him, he was a manager of a national side and successful at the time. Yeah. So this is, if you're a manager of a national side, you've got a voice. You've got a voice.
Oh yeah.
You're at a press conference where so people are going to listen to you.
Yeah.
So I can't help think that maybe there was something that he knew or was going to talk about. Very
possibly. I mean, the whole thing that ties in with all these things is that what we're looking at sporting institutions, care home institutions, charitable institutions, universities, preschools like the McMartin preschool, that have all provably been involved in this sort of thing. I mean, the extension of and to prove this sort of connection to the elite, the extension of the Franklin scandal was it was connected to a gentleman called Craig Spence. Craig Spence was, I believe he was a politician or an aide to the Republican Party. He was caught at like 2 a.m. taking a 15-year-old rent boy around the White House. When he was caught and questioned, he said that the lad was his nephew, which was provably untrue. So the question is, what we're looking at here, we're looking at MPs, sports players, we're looking at institutions, we're looking at money, sex, and we're looking at blackmail. And the other one that people need to really investigate is good friend of Prince Andrew and Peter Mendelsohn, Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was doing exactly the same thing, a wealthy billionaire known to be a paedophile.
Can you say that, Neil?
Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah. Oh, so he was.
Oh, he's been
in prison.
He's not been to prison, but he paid off a load of witnesses. But essentially,
You sure you can say he's a paedophile? Does it say that here?
Oh, I don't
on
know.
Wikipedia. Well, you said it, Neil, not me.
Right. Whoa.
Well, I don't know. See, I'm not really.
There was a case with Jeffrey Epstein. Essentially, let me find it. Right, Jeffrey Epstein.
The Duke of York's, this is, yeah, it actually says it here, yeah. The Duke of York's billionaire paedophile friend kept a secret journal described as the Holy Grail by lawyers, which listed his alleged underage victims and the celebrity guests he entertained at his Florida mansion. Yeah. That's in the Daily Telegraph.
Whew, we're all right then. Okay. But basically, I mean, the woman that was pimping these girls or was luring these girls for Jeffrey Epstein was Ghislaine Maxwell, who's Robert Maxwell's daughter. Now, what was interesting about the Jeffrey Epstein case was it was a girl called Virginia Roberts came out, and basically there's all sorts of things actually in the first book, talking about drugging and basically being a masseuse at exclusive, I think it was a Rockefeller-run golf club actually, but the thing that Jeffrey Epstein was doing was taking groups of these girls at a time, taking them to his house in Mexico. So he's transporting underage prostitutes across the border, and all these houses were set up with hidden cameras, which is exactly, again, like the Franklin scandal, like the origins of the MK Ultra, like Operation Midnight Climax. It's basically the principal tenet of this is one of the things that we do. If we want to blackmail people, we film them having sex with somebody.
Right, okay. Yeah, it's disturbing. So how do you think you could expose and crack open this kind of activity?
I think it's very it's difficult. It's very difficult for a number of reasons, because one of the things is people don't want to realise that it is institutionalised. People will think that it is just
man in a raincoat. Man
in a raincoat, yeah, exactly. You know, dirty bloke at the end of the street and stuff like that. And it's not. It is institutionalised through the entertainment industry. Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, both the huge film stars, both talked about paedophilia being rampant through Hollywood as well.
What is wrong with these people, Neil? What is wrong with them?
And the other one that we've not discussed yet is Paul Gambaccini, who basically came out, Paul Gambaccini's radio disc jockey, came out saying, oh, it's worse than that. I know for a fact and can prove that Jimmy Saville was sleeping with dead bodies. Okay,
yeah, I've heard that as well.
He's a necrophile, and this came out for one day, and then it was completely shut up.
So he said this, and it was on various websites.
Yeah, well, it was in the Daily Mail, for God's sake.
Right, yeah. Okay.
And then that disappeared.
So he was given the key to the mortuary or something, allegedly?
Yeah, apparently so, yeah.
So do you believe that?
Yeah, I do. Like, I mean, he was given the key to the secure hospital and allowed to wander around and chat with the Yorkshire Ripper. Like, as well, do you know what I mean? Like, so it's not too far of a stretch. What's interesting about Paul Gambaccini is like, it was in for one day, and then if you go on the BBC website now, you'll find loads of advertisements for Paul Gambaccini's radio show.
So that information about Saville having sex with dead bodies comes from Paul Gambaccini?
Yeah.
And only Paul Gambaccini, is it? Or?
Yeah,
right,
so far.
right.
He then shut up about it,
right.
And since then he's been heavily publicised by the BBC, almost as if the squeaky wheel got the grease.
Right, explain what that means.
Essentially, they've gone to him and said, Paul, stop talking about this. You've got two choices. You mention it again, it won't be good for you. You don't mention it again, we're going to make you a star.
Right, so you were telling me before that he's recently appeared on quite a lot of BBC web pages.
Well, yeah, on the BBC.
In a positive light.
Well, he's advertising his radio show, which
right.
is not a new radio show. It's just
right.
all of a sudden he seems to be advertisable.
You think he's been told to shut up?
Yeah, probably.
Right.
Yeah, very possibly. Yeah. But, you know, again, it's endemic through the entire industry. Jonathan King, Gary Glitter. Jonathan King, whose bail was paid by Simon Cowell. Why is Simon Cowell paying a third of, not all the bail, but why is he paying £5,000 bail for a guy that admitted to raping John Lennon? What's going on about that? The other thing that's interesting
John Lennon?
Apparently so, yeah. This is what Jonathan King said.
Jonathan King raped John Lennon?
Apparently, this is what I've heard with him. Well, he says he was consensual, but, you know. John Lennon didn't say it, Jonathan King said this.
Is John Lennon gay?
No.
So why is it?
Because that's what he said. The other thing is, I tell you where you can get away with it. You can get away with it if you're Bill Wyman. You can get away with it if you're Pete Townsend. You get away with it if you're Jimmy Page. You get away with it if you're R. Kelly. You get away with it if you're Elvis.
Can you name all those people, Neil?
Get away with it.
Are you allowed to name all those people?
Yeah, it's in their autobiographies. Bill Wyman ran off with a 13-year-old girl. Jimmy Page ran off with a 14-year-old girl. Pete Townsend used his credit card to look at under 5 rape things. It was researching a book, obviously. R. Kelly's banned from his school, and there's a video of him urinating on a young girl. Elvis married Priscilla Presley when she was 13. Roman Polanski drugged and sodomized a 13-year-old girl.
Where are we going, Neil? I mean, you mentioned that the reason why these rings are not exposed is because possibly intelligence agencies may be involved who control the media and also control people in the police force.
Yeah.
So they can stop people being arrested, and they can stop stories coming out if they want to.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you know about intelligence agencies and their possible involvement with specifically to mind control.
Yeah,
because you think it could be some kind of mind control over some of these people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, Claudia Mullin, I mean, this is proven, this is in court testimony, she was sent to a place...
This is in the States?
Yeah, when she was 9, she was sent to a place called Deep Creek Valley in Maryland to learn how to sexually pleasure men. Right, and this was at the behest of the CIA. Okay, Christine DiNicola was sexually tortured when she was 4. Paul Benassi, who was involved in the Franklin saving and loan scandal, he's the person that kidnapped Johnny Gosch. He had 114 separate personalities in his head. Now, the key to creating alternate personalities is trauma, is traumatic abuse, because I mean it's quite interesting because essentially prostitution is a double-edged sword. Prostitutes have to sometimes take on a role, you know, basically to blank it out to get through it, and so they're an alternate personality, and then that repeated trauma again and again and again compounds that. And so especially when you're doing it to children and such like that, this gives them, they are ripe for then turning into mind-controlled subjects. The other element of the mind control is the perception management, the way that the media handles it and the way that the public see these things. And the first thing is the very concept that the public don't really think that this is possible. And again, why would you unless you actually bothered to look into this horrible stuff?
All right, Neil, well, that's all we've got time for today. We are going to talk about mind control in next week's show. But until then, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.